You ready to kick things off here, Roxanne?
Right. Yeah, I'm ready to go.
All right, so welcome everybody. Today's topic is on blending or transforming physical events and activities to a virtual environment. We wanted to just give you a little bit of information about who we are before we jump into things. So Roxanne and I both work for a company called i2i Technologies. We're partnering with the TxDLA in sponsoring this webinar series for everybody. You'd see a little bit, we're video people, right? So we kind of play in this environment all the time. We focus on partnerships. We focus on keeping things very simple, flexible, scalable, dependable, reliable. We're really focused on doing things effectively.
All right, so I'm Roxanne Glaser, and I'm Director of Marketing and Learning for i2i Technology. And just quick background, I'm a K-12 educator by training. I have a master's in learning technologies from Pepperdine. And it is, it has come in handy. So I was in Cadre 3 of their online learning program in 2000. So I have used that extensively since. I've been a regional content specialist working with K-12 educators in Central Texas. I've worked in video as a content provider, teaching two-way interactive lessons to schools throughout the U.S. I'm in Canada. We've taught a couple lessons to groups in Australia. And then I've also worked with lots of different organizations in helping them bring more interactivity and ways to take that face-to-face learning and use online and distance learning technologies to create wonderful learning experiences for students. And then I've also been working with program evaluation and some process improvement because, as Ken mentioned, we do like things to be as simple as possible. So I'll turn it back to Ken.
Yeah. So this must be a slide that Roxanne designed for me because, it doesn't say anything about sweetheart or hilarious or just awesome person. Just give some facts about who I am and what my background is. That's my Grinch picture from Christmas time. I practice Grinching sometimes all year long. I don't seclude it just to Christmas. But my background's K-12 education. I started teaching 5th grade. Kind of fell into educational technology and interactive video conferencing in particular, and got involved with the TxDLA and then the USDLA. I really focus on helping people with collaborating, video communication. You can see that very last bullet. I consider myself a video advocate. Sometimes that can be perceived as video bullying. I'm a big video proponent of using video. So I want to give you a little bit of information about the TxDLA webinar series. Hopefully most of you, if not all of you, have been to their website. They have a whole page set up for the Keep Connecting. I think, Roxanne, did you mention Lisa made a comment about that at the beginning?
I did. I mentioned that she said that this page will be changing, updating probably as we have more recordings, more resources becoming available. Just think of this as a tool to support the community. So Lisa, the one thing I was wondering, the URL will probably stay the same, maybe not. So, and you'll be communicating, follow TxDLA, probably social media, definitely, so that you can get this information as it becomes available.
Yeah, and so this is basically we'll kind of walk you through the page. At the very top, they have those resource links. And so anybody that's kind of been following it from the beginning, they've just continued to add those. You can see the last update was a couple days ago on March 16th. So continue to look back at that top part. And then when you dig down into it a little bit, it gives an overview of what the intention is of the webinar series. We want these to be very conversational. We want to hear from you. So that's why we have the opportunity for you to be able to interact through chat. We're both keeping an eye on that to talk to you throughout the session today. And then at the very last part, I wanted to point out, this is where they're listing the different sessions. And you can see we did the first session on Tuesday. That was the very first one. And right at the bottom, it says view recording. So now you can actually go there and click. And if you missed it or you want to go back and reference something that was talked about, you can see the recording of it. And then where it says sign up for webinar, that was the one for today that we're in right now. That will magically change to view recording roughly somewhere between 24 and 48 hours after the session. The recording will be available. And then you'll continue to see sessions populate there for you to sign up for, because right now this is planning on kind of being an ongoing thing as things develop every Tuesday and Thursday from 11:30 to 12:30 Central. So before we get started, I thought this is a great opportunity to talk about my friend Liam Neeson. How many of you have seen the movie Taken? Is anybody familiar with the movie Taken? My daughter and I just watched it again the other week. In that movie, Liam Neeson plays a character that has a very particular set of skills, right? He doesn't have any money, so I can identify with that part. And I can also identify with having a very particular set of skills, and I have a feeling a lot of you in the audience today can as well. Yeah. I see Michelle like, yes. It's like, I don't have a lot of money, but I have a very particular set of skills that we've acquired over a very, very long career. And so we're all kind of, or a lot of us are in that space now where there are people that really are looking to us and the skills that we've acquired and saying, help us. What should we be doing? And as a lot of you know, maybe even for yourself at times, I know for me at times, it's overwhelming, right? You know, it's kind of, we're all trying to carry on as best we can, with new normal, which seems to change hourly at times. We're trying to be like, okay, well, we got this personal stuff going on. We got work going on. Those of us with kids, like, okay, the kids are here. Oh, what's going to happen next? What's going to happen next? So it's very important for us to be able to, one, kind of step back and be like, okay, let me take a breath. Let me stay calm. And let me see, how can I use the skills that I've acquired over some of us very, 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 very long career, and use those skills to help other people, especially because I think most of us are in this boat too, where it's like, we've been trying to talk to people. We've not even been trying. We have been talking to people about, hey, here are the things that we should do as, from a best practice perspective. Here are things that will be helpful. And nobody really wanted to listen to that. They're like, yeah, that's okay, but I kind of got my thing going on here. And now a lot of us are in a situation where it's like, hey, what was that thing you were telling me about that I could put my class online and I could work from home? And can you talk to me about that again? Because I want to shut everything off and pay attention to you. So again, just if you haven't seen that movie, it's a fun movie to watch. And you can also kind of take some things like, throughout that movie, Liam Neeson's character, very calm, very logical thinking, even in situations where he's like, this does not look good. He's like, this is the best that I can do right now. And he continues to proceed and move along the way. So to our topic today, I wanted to put this question out there first to make sure we're kind of on the same page and to hear from those of you that are attending. But to you, what does it mean to blend or transform a physical event or activity to a virtual environment? What does that mean to you? And Roxanne, while we're kind of waiting for some comments to come in, maybe give your perspective. What does it mean to you?
That is, well, and as you said, we've been getting a lot of messages this week as we are looking at this. And for me, one of the things that always comes to mind is, I always say, if I could be everywhere and could go everywhere to do everything, I'd love to be face to face in every possible situation. But what I learned, I guess 20 years ago as I was a student, was that there are technologies and ways that we can, if it's done with intention and done thoughtfully, you can create these amazing learning experiences and other experiences where they can have, not the same thing as being there, but it can have this rich connection of learner to content, of person to person. There's a great space in the tools that we have now for social learning. And so for me, that's one of the things as we look at and especially now this week as people are like, everyone's scrambling to be like, okay, how do I do this virtually? One of the things for me I'm always looking at is how do we have equity in those spaces? And I know TxDLA offers the great accessibility course. So that's going to be one thing that's going to be of concern to people going forward. Another thing is to remember as we're doing this, what is that intention, so that we don't end up chasing the technologies or a cool little bell and whistle or something that you're like making it more complicated than it needs to be. So those are some of the things that pop into my mind as, as I've been answering and helping people this week.
Yeah, we're seeing a lot of comments come in on the chat too, and people are kind of echoing some of the things that you're saying, Roxanne. And I particularly like the word that you used, equity, because I think a lot of times we confuse equal and equity, and they're not necessarily the same thing, right? Because it's like what one person may need might not be exactly what another person may need. And so you look at the situation. The other word I like to use a lot is similar versus same, because it's like if we kind of say this is what we do in this situation, when we go to another situation, we got to look at the whole picture, right? Because we might not be able to do the exact same thing. We got different players, different things involved, but we might be able to make it similar. We're going to kind of dive into this too.
And one of the words that Michelle just used was the spirit and the intent. And one of the groups that I was helping last night, I said, remember now, and I was helping someone who has never taught online or through video, anything. She's only taught face-to-face. She does have an online structure, but one of the last things is, and you could just see, we're connected in video, I could see just panic and stress on her face. And I said, one of the things to remember is you're an amazing teacher. We have this supportive group. We're coming together. We're learning this, and it can be amazing. We can celebrate together. We can struggle together. We can share. There's going to be space for social learning, and you're still going to be able to teach at a high level. She's a master teacher. And just to see that look on her face and that spirit of that, we're going to be able to take your lessons and your learning, and we're going to be able to do it in a different way. We might have to change some things, but it's going to be okay. So Michelle, yes, thank you for that. The spirit and the intention. I think that really is going to dovetail nicely into our talk today.
And just to make sure we're all here on the same page before we go to the next slide, I think everybody was kind of tagging different pieces in here, but blended, obviously you have a physical component blended with a virtual component, sometimes synchronously at the same time, like the TxDLA conference we were going to do was going to have a virtual component to it, right? Everybody was going to be in one physical location, and some people that couldn't get to Fort Worth, they were going to be attending online virtually at the same time, being able to see everybody, interact with everybody, but in a virtual. So we're going to blend those two environments. Or now we're seeing, now that we're all told to practice social distancing, right, we're having to flip and say, we need to completely transform a physical event into a 100% virtual event. And that's where that whole, okay, what was the things that we were doing in the physical event? How can we transform that to a virtual environment? And that kind of leads us to this next piece that we like to use and talk to at I2I Technologies, which is the blended process, right? So we like to think about that as it's a thoughtful combination of goals and resources. It's kind of looking at the big picture calmly, right, and taking it step by step and making sure we're not forgetting anything in the madness to react and act on something. Because commonly what happens, right, somebody above you, some supervisor says, we need to take care of this right now. And, part of your job to serve that person well is to say, yes, you're right. We do need to take care of that right now. Let's sit down and talk for a minute. Versus like, let me go grab my boots and my fireman jacket, slide down the pole and run into action. You can do that. And sometimes you're forced to do that, right? But sometimes that's not the best way to put the fire out, okay? So we like to talk to people about kind of thoughtfully thinking through the blended process. Obviously, if you have more time, you can do this proactively, but sometimes in a reactive mode, this is a quick thing, right? So we're kind of talking about it very calmly and slowly right now, but sometimes you don't have that luxury, but you still need to be like, okay, what's this, what's this, what's this, what's this, let's go. But we like to start with that first part up there, which is set your intention. What's the intention? What are we trying to do? Before somebody's like, we need to use video. It's like, do we? Hold on a minute. Let's back up a second. What are we doing? What are we doing here? What are the goals? What are we trying to accomplish? We want people to be able to share resources together. Okay, what are those resources? What are they sharing? What are they talking about? How are they going to interact together? So we're kind of talking about what are all the aspects that we want to do. Make sure that that's all clearly identified. The next step is take an inventory of your resources. What do you have available to you already that may be able to help you achieve some, if not all, of those intentions? And sometimes the resources reveal like, okay, we have a few different ways we could approach some of these things, right? So it's like, these are the things we said we want to do. These are the things that we have available to us. And how best do we do that? And then that next component is the circumstances of the environment. And when we say circumstances of the environment, we're talking about, what do we have in play here? Do we have some people together in a physical space, some people virtually? Is everybody at home? Does everybody have access to a computer? Does everybody have internet? What are the personalities of these people that we're dealing with? So the circumstances of the environment aren't always just the equipment and the connectivity. Sometimes it's like considering, okay, we have these people that latch onto things very quickly. We can leverage them to help us support the others. This person's very good at this aspect. They can help us do this. So it is really the circumstances of the environment are the people and the tools, and the connectivity and what you have available to you. It's kind of that resources part. And what I want to say about all these too, we kind of have this in a circle that's flowing, because sometimes as you're talking about things, you're like, oh, right, this is also important. And so you pop back to the intention. You're like, we need to write that down too. That's an important aspect. So you're kind of constantly looking at these things, but looking at them in these different buckets so you don't miss anything. Once you kind of have, here's the intention, here's the resources that we have available, here are the resources, here are the circumstances, the people and the environment that we're in right now, then you can kind of put a plan together. All right. And, we don't have the word tentative there, but guess what? Every single plan you ever come up with is tentative because things change all the time, right? We're living it right now. Sometimes, at the beginning of all this mess, it was literally, hourly. You're like, okay, now what's happening? So when that happens, guess what? That may impact the circumstances of your environment. So you got to take another step back and be like, how have things changed? Because that's going to affect the plan, and we need to adapt the plan based on that. Oh, we have another resource available that we forgot about. Add it to the list. All right. So that you kind of have that plan part, and that's the do and review too. So do review, because you got to get into action at some point. You don't have the luxury for this to go into the beat down of committee after committee after committee meeting. Some of us are probably like, I did not like that. And I said, I wish this wouldn't happen anymore. But guess what? I don't like this immediate reactive stuff either. But anyway, so do review, and you're kind of doing all these things in motion, but keeping in constant mind what's the intention. Because what often happens in this too, and why it's important to have this down, is you start doing these things and all of a sudden you're like, why are we doing this again? And that's when it's like, let's go back and look at the intentions. It's like, oh, wait a minute. We're doing something right now that we said has nothing to do with what we intended. So it means one of two things, right? It's an intention that you didn't note, or you shouldn't be doing it. Stop it, right? So you got to look and be like, wait, this does not relate to any of our intentions. We need to stop doing this. What comes to mind is the toilet paper people. You don't need that much toilet paper. Stop. Okay, stop. So I see Ramona popping in there too. I'll stop talking and turn it over to Roxanne for some examples.
And Ken, as I was watching looking at the blended process again, I think what's going to be really interesting is we have the webinars, and as we work with TxDLA, and we're bringing together this community, because as you were talking about the taking inventory of resources, it reminded me of what Michelle was sharing in the webinar on Tuesday of how, as this started happening and they're kind of assessing the situation, they have their intention, and then they start looking internally first. What are some resources that we already have that we might be able to deploy or to use in this way? And so that's, it's going to be really interesting to see those connections built into that. So as Ken is shared of the blended process, I've been going through that process. Ken, the other thing you don't have, that you just showed one of those, and literally this week I think I've got about 10 of those that have been spinning in various different stages as we help people kind of start to navigate and to blend or bring things virtually. So what I want to share with you are some of the kind of key tips. I'm talking to TxDLA membership because as Ken shared with the Liam Neeson, we have a unique set of skills, and people are looking at us to be leaders and to be helpers. So these 3 items that I'm going to talk to you about have come through 3 different experiences that I had this week. And one of them was connecting my 86-year-old aunt to try to connect with her through some type of technology so that we could see her, she could see and hear us, because she has COPD and we don't want her going out. So that was one instance, and she does not have a smartphone. She only has a laptop. And so I realized as we were trying to get all the cousins coming together, and her daughter works at a hospital, so she's otherwise occupied, so we're doing the tech support. I realized, I'm like, oh my gosh, it's the blended process. So it was really kind of like that scene in the Apollo movie where they put the box down and are like, we're going to make it work with this. And really that to me is our intention was, we got to get her connected. Here's our box of stuff we're working with. And so how do we do that? So we worked with her. I've worked with a couple of folks that, like I mentioned before, have never taught, that they've literally only taught face-to-face. One of them had a little online environment already set up, so some resources posted there. So, and that one has a set number of students, but the average age of the students in that environment is probably 60 to 65. So we have an older population that we're working with there to get everybody online. And then I've worked with organizations on business continuity. So people that have, I've done training and they are like, we just connect our conference rooms together because we're just going to talk to each other. Suddenly they're like, oh, these are people who never thought they would work remotely, that are not comfortable sharing content, things that we take for granted. So, and as Ken mentioned before, I've had this comment 3 different times this week. It seems like last week we were still like all multitasking and nobody's really focusing, halfway listening to everything. 3 times this week, as I have worked one-on-one and coaching sessions and getting, doing a tech check and getting people comfortable with the technologies. 3 different times we've started the connection. I've been on the phone until we can get everything working. They said, wait a minute, let me shut everything down so I can listen to you. It was that important. And they were like, stop everything, because I need to learn this. I need to learn this well. And I don't know anything. So in those experiences that I've had, these are some things that, as I've been reflecting and as we continue to get more people calling in and how we can help them. So this is my message to the helpers in the group, okay, with this amazing set of skills you have. The first one is, as we are moving into this environment is the technologies. And this, to me, I know this, like, but sometimes I forget it. We do not all have the same technologies. As we talk about accessibility, as we look at creating that equitable environment. So this one to me of just to send someone a link and then not check in on them or just hope they get it. I think it is going to be important any way you can to amplify your way to help. Because what I'm finding is that when I do have that personal connection, they're so thankful. So I know we're dealing with scale here. We've got a few number of really expert helpers. How do we scale that? And I can't remember, I think it might have been Charlene talking in the other webinar of how we're finding, those power users. We're finding people who can advocate, who can continue to help with that. So that is the one thing of how are you going to help them and to even ask. So as I was helping in some of these different ones, it was like, oh, I didn't ask, and that started to become, how are you trying to access that content? What device are you using? And for us, we're having to deepen our understanding even more because, sometimes they'll say it works the same on the different operating systems, different devices. It doesn't. I mean, that is going to be consistent. We know people don't have the same amount of bandwidth. We know online services, some of them are being used way more than they ever had. So we're doing a little stress testing there. So I think it's very important for us to remember and to not assume what our constituents are going to have. So that was one of the questions that I had for the group. Are there ways, do you take this into account? Like do you have back-end analytics that you can access to see, what is the percentage of like mobile devices or cell phones that are being accessing your content? So I know that's something that would be important as you start to scale. So think about the technology. Ken, do you have a question, comment?
Yeah, I had a comment too, and I see Ramona too. Thank you for continuing to share resources and things in the chat too. Everybody can see some of the things that Ramona is putting out there. But I think in reference to technologies too, as best we can, right? I think it's important to give people choice, and the choice should be around, whatever it is that you're delivering. Again, it's the intention. What's the intention? And what are some choices we can give people? Because maybe not everybody's comfortable with this. So maybe we have another choice. And I think especially in environments, maybe not so much in universities where students are kind of expected to come to the table being able to have, a laptop or connectivity and things. But in the K-12 environments, like, does everybody have internet access at home? Does everybody have access to a device at home? If we want to flip to all online remote learning, how are we going to do that effectively? Do we have to give choice and say, well, if you do have that, you can do it this way. If you don't, maybe you can come and pick up some, maybe there's some equipment we can loan a certain number of people. Maybe they can come and pick up a packet of information that they can view. Maybe somehow we can burn videos onto a DVD player and they can take instructional videos home to watch them on a DVD player because they don't have internet access. I think the good thing going for us is most people have access these days, but again, we're kind of making a big assumption if we think every single person has the equipment and access to it. So that's why it's important to think about, well, what are some choices that we can give people? And I also am a big advocate. When you give people choice, you give them an opportunity to buy into what you're doing. So you're saying, again, back to the blended process. This is our intention. These are the resources we have available to us. These are our circumstances. You're kind of explaining that to people, saying, this is why we're doing what we're doing. And because of that, here are a couple of choices that we can offer to you. And then they have buy-in. You're not saying everybody immediately has to do this. Sometimes you're in a situation where you have to do that, or you feel like you have to do that. It doesn't generally go well. How many of us like to be told exactly what to do? Not many of us, right? So think about that in the choice.
Excellent. And Ken, I'm seeing comments coming in. Yes, the analytics to, that you can get so you can see how people are accessing that content. Yes, again, Michelle, very much so. And Ray is adding in comments for the IEPs. Definitely. So this is, as you think about technology and then you add on to it all the curriculum implications. So it really is that thing of my point here is to not assume. And that is because sometimes, we can tell ourselves, yeah, oh, I don't assume, Roxanne. I never think, but when things get going and we get stressed out and things are so unpredictable, sometimes we can forget that. So I just wanted to make sure we bring that to the forefront and to remember to ask. So, and we're going to be helping people on scale. We're going to be helping people one-on-one. So you're going to be asked to help probably everything in between. I know with a couple of groups, there have been certain, I've worked with different levels in organizations. And so some that, like I said, are like never thought they would ever have to use this technology or always thought they would have an admin to push buttons from. Now we're like, yes, people can, how do we help and create that level of comfort with whatever device that they're bringing? So my second point that I realized, and this came to me as I was working with a group last night, of the language that we use. I'm not talking about, as we're like, we might be frustrated and use that kind of language, but our helping language. So when we are helping and what we use as just common, the way we talk to each other, you get a group of distance learning online people, like Ken tells a story. The first year he went to the TxDLA conference, we're like, these are my people. You get around people and we're like, we understand that language. We're experts in that. It's full of jargon, acronyms. As we're helping people, what I encourage us to do is to be able to use simple, clear language. And with that, adding in illustrations, visuals with it. We're doing the captioning with the recorded videos, so things that help to communicate clearly and effectively. So I'm encouraging you to, as you're helping, make sure that it is clear, simple. One of the things that I always like to do is I'm working with someone that is new to the technology, and that was kind of how we started this. Right now, people that have never taught online are being asked to teach online. So their brains are newbie brains to this. So their brains are working very hard to do simple things. Those of us that are gathered here, a lot of us have been working in distance learning for a while, and our brains are expert brains. And we have lots of choice. We know these things. We've worked in it. Like you said, that slide of we've done this over a very long career. So our brains just immediately see things that newbie brain will not. So one of the ways that I like to use is if you can have a simple analogy that connects the known in their world with this unknown that we're trying to get them to understand. So simple example, I worked with a group on a life-size cloud platform and I was explaining virtual meeting rooms. Well, they work a little differently in life-size because they're permanent virtual meeting rooms. And so the way I explain that is it's like your physical meeting rooms. So if we were in the building and you see that meeting room and the door's unlocked, anyone can walk into it. That's the same way your virtual meeting rooms work from your directory in Life-Size Cloud. So if you log on and you see there's nobody in there, you can click and you can go into it. And that type of analogy, something that's new and unfamiliar to something that's known, can be very helpful during this time. So again, please, and I share this because the group I was working with last night, we thought everybody was doing well. There were a group, it was 16 people that were online in video. And, there was one that we could see her. She looked like she was doing fine. And then when we did our check-in, she said, you know what? I do not understand these words. I hear you saying them. I don't understand them. And I'm so frustrated. I can't participate. And so, we were like, thank you for speaking up. And so we're going to work with her one-on-one, and that's not always the, right case scenario for everything. But for this one, we can do that. But it is don't assume that the language you're using is being understood. So what are some ways that you can add that and to check in? So Ken, I see you want to add on to that.
Actually, before you segue into the next one, Andrea made a comment that in the chat that I wanted to point out to everybody, and maybe you guys can jump in on there, especially those of you that have a lot of background and experience in online training. She's asking, like, what are some time frames that are recommended for new people? For example, converting 6-hour classroom trainings into online trainings. What are some tips to make this possible? So if you can drop something in there for Andrea, like just from my experience, Andrea, I mean, I don't know if the time frame you're speaking of is like time frame to get that together, or time frame to go from like a 6-hour face-to-face physical to an online. But again, in reference to the blended process, I would, kind of look at, well, what were the intentions of the 6-hour classroom training? I'd want to honor that first. Like, what were you trying to accomplish in that 6-hour training? Because there might be part of that 6 hours that you don't necessarily need to translate into online, especially if it's asynchronous, right? Because during that 6-hour training, you probably have breaks worked in and different things like that, where in an online world, people can kind of decide when they want to take a break. They can just pause their work. Even if it's a video, there's a video that they're watching, they can often pause the video. Okay, Andrea, I see the content itself. So yeah, I think you got to kind of look at what were you, again, the intention, what are you doing in the 6-hour training, and then see what's the best way, here are the resources I have, here's the circumstances, you look at all those things, and how do I package this? Do I maybe package this into a couple different modules? Does it lend itself to that, where it's like, okay, here's like kind of like a beginning, a middle, and end, maybe it's a 4-part series or whatever. So it'll probably depend. Will a 6-hour physical face-to-face class be a 6-hour online class? Likely not, I would say. It could be less, it could be more, because there might be things that you can do easier face-to-face that you might have to unpack a little bit differently online that may make it require more time. Or like I said, it could be the opposite too, because maybe in your face-to-face, there's lots of time in there built in for breaks and different things like that, where you're like, okay, well, that stuff gets removed. I see some other people popping in too. Rhonda, Ray, thank you for doing that.
And that one too, and Andrea, as you're looking at that, remember, as we go back to that intention, and so one of the groups that I'm working with, part of and it's a 6-hour face-to-face, but during it, one of the elements of it is building community. And so that's one that this particular instructor is very concerned about, because we work at, the students work at small groups at tables. So there's times where the tables are working together. This particular one, they bring in lunch and they eat together. So as we work through the kind of adapting it, that's one of the things is, we shared with on the blended process of to really look at which parts are essential to your outcomes and which parts are not. So if it's, in this case, we've got to figure out a way to have the virtual lunch or the virtual breaks, or how do we mimic the working at tables, because this particular instructor likes to walk around and people are physically creating things. And so those are some of the things that we have to take into account. One of the things that I'm going to be encouraging her to do is if she could do a couple portions, is I think Raymond dropped in the chat about chunking things, or maybe that was Rhonda, if there's a way to take some of that where we could watch it before. Because the one thing that with this particular group, since we're doing video, and she wants it to be all in one 6-hour chunk, if you've never been on video, that's a long time, in front of your computer at one block. So that's one of the things that, we're like, okay, how is this going to work? And then the other thing that we've already been having the conversation with this group of, this is our first time to do it. We're going to settle our expectations. And so we're going to help each other, and we're kind of all in this together.
Yeah, and just to tag on before you talk about your users tip, Roxanne, it's important to give yourself a little bit of grace, right? Do your best, okay? I mean, sometimes you have these expectations, like Roxanne just mentioned about expectations. You can kind of see the end, but you're not there yet, but you want your quality to be there. And it's like, okay, look, I'm just going to do the best I can in the moment right now with the time that I have, the resources I have, the skill level I have. And I'm going to be okay with it, knowing that I'm going to learn through this process. And the next time I do it, I'm going to be even better. My best is going to continue to get better as I go along. So just keep that in mind as you're working towards these things too.
And then my last one that really, I wanted to put it here just to reiterate, it's the users. Everything that we're doing, we as the helpers in this, and that's people are looking to us, and we have the expertise to help. We have the expertise and skill to calm and to transform. And so that's where I want us to always hold that user forefront, whether that user is an aunt, a student, a colleague, a neighbor. We're getting all kinds of requests and people wanting to use different types of technologies in this way. So with this, someone told me this, I think it was probably one of the first principals I ever worked for, like years and years ago, because I was just so, the students that I was working with, they asked so many questions. It was like, and I was convinced they were just doing this to really challenge me, to just be like, okay, we're just to see if we can just really irritate her by asking 500 questions today. And so the principal said, one of the things that I always take with me is like, you know what, Roxanne, settle. As new learners or people that are learning to do something or trying to do something differently. And again, this is that newbie brain. You're like, when you don't understand or can't figure out why, you're going to ask. And so look at those questions as it's like your gift. It's a way, an invitation to help. And so answer them. And I know, keep the email thread. You might have to answer it 14 times. So that's one of the things you can do in the email. A lot of people are using FAQs, different ways like that. But you want people to interact. And as we get to that and to have them be successful, we have to let them feel comfortable asking. And so that's just one of the things of be, beyond all of this and everything that's going on, we talk technology, we talk language, always hold that it's that student, it's a human that, we're trying to connect and trying to help learn and connect and have those conversations with. So that was the one that, and with the users, the other tip that I discovered this week, there was one of the gentlemen that I was working with. I'm not for sure exactly what happened. And so as he described it to me, the incident, it was different from what someone else in the meeting described to me that happened. And so then I was like, okay, everybody take a break and then we'll work on this afternoon. And so then as we came back to it, and he described it for me again, it was a little bit different. I couldn't really understand what he was doing, but I gave him a chance. I listened to him. And then I said, you know what, let's just build this from the ground up. And so then we just took him back and I was like, let's just do this sequentially. And for him, it worked. Instead of like spending so much energy and resources on trying to troubleshoot, and because he wanted to be able to get stuff done. So it's like, okay, let's come back here. I know we can build it this way. I'm confident in this process. Let's do this. And so we can get people from frustration to success, kind of the quickest way possible. I think that's going to be really important. We've got a lot of people that are moving into this virtual or blended world that have never been there before. So sometimes, and I know those of us that are on the call, we've got these amazing problem-solving, troubleshooting brains. But sometimes for that user, that can cause more stress or anxiety when they're like, wait, slow down. You're going so fast. I don't know what you're doing. So keep them in mind. How can we create calm, successful students and as quickly, kind of as easily as possible? Oh, thank you, Ramona, for sharing that in. Looks like creative modules is another effective way. Thank you. And so those of you that are sharing resources into the chat, we're also kind of collecting those. And so Lisa's adding those to the page, and we're sharing those afterwards as well. So really definitely contributing in. Thank you so much for that. And Ken, I see you ready to add on.
Yeah, before we transition to the next thought here as we close out, to reiterate what Roxanne's saying about the users is really understand the power that you hold in the words that you use and the tone that you use, right? So you might be like, I didn't say anything wrong. Well, if you say it like that, I'm already feeling a little threatened. Like we joke all the time on our team because my passionate voice often sounds like my angry voice. And it's like, why are you so angry? It's like, I'm not angry. Now I'm angry. Why are you asking me that I'm angry? So it is important to kind of think, okay, wait a minute here. Let me think about my words. Let me be thoughtful about how I say this. And, so it is, we have lots of opportunities to practice patience with folks. And I think we also have lots of opportunities to offer each other some grace and then to apologize, right? Because you have lots of things going on in your life, just like everybody else that you're dealing with, right? And so if somebody's short with you, it often has nothing to do with you, right? Maybe they just had a phone call about something or something happened that morning that they're like, it's weighing on them and they're working, trying to do their best, right? They're doing their best at focusing on what is at hand. So it's an opportunity to just give that person some grace, not take it personally. And then also, if you are the one that happens to have a short moment, to own it, just say, you know what? My kid was getting on my friggin' nerves today. Okay. Let me just say that. Doesn't excuse how I just talked to you. So I apologize for that. But you don't know my 11-year-old. All right. You don't know my 17-year-old. You don't know my husband, my wife, right? So it is an opportunity to really connect with others and be honest with others. And again, like Roxanne's whole intention with this slide is be a helper and help others. So we don't have very much time. We have about 5 minutes left, but we did want to introduce this, and maybe we will do another session where we can unpack this a little bit deeper and kind of talk about it. But we like to point out to people these different types of human interaction. And we like to think about, we got your email, you got your text chatting or messaging stuff that you like to use. I would say maybe in social media kind of stuff fits into there. You got your phone calls, you got your audio calls only. People like to just talk on the phone. You got your webinars like we're doing today, your one-way communication, either live or maybe it's something you record and offer to people. You got your two-way interactive video, right, where everybody's on video. You're doing your FaceTime with your family, or you're using Microsoft Teams, or you're using Zoom or something like that. Life-size cloud like we're using Roxanne and I are using today to have two-way communication. So you have that, and then you got your same space stuff. You're all in the same physical space, which we've pretty much all been banned from doing the next few weeks, right? So it is important to kind of think about, these are all the different types, right? There's not just one, and there's always not just one best one either. So sometimes you got to look at it, be like, okay, well, we can't be in the same space, so what's the next best thing? Again, in reference to the blended process, what's the next best thing if these are our intentions, these are the resources we have available, these are the circumstances of our environment, the people and the connectivity that they have, right? What's the next best thing for us to do this? And, sometimes it's like, well, I think two-way video is, but then I'm like, this person doesn't like that. Okay, so maybe it's a phone call because I feel like we need to talk live one-on-one. Maybe a text message is appropriate. Maybe it's an email because I have a lot of information I need to unpack. And if anybody's gotten, I'm famous for these too because I like to be very thorough. You send a long text message to somebody like, dude, totally not for a text message. So again, it is important to think about those and maybe we can unpack that a little bit deeper on another conversation with the TxDLA series. So again, thanks for joining us today. What we do at I2I Technologies is really just focus on helping people adjust solutions that are simple and dependable, easy to use. We really focus on practicality. Anybody that's worked with us knows that we like to keep things very practical and reliable and easy to use. So yeah, so we kind of practice what we preach too. We like to have conversations to kind of unpack things with folks, put plans together, and then talk about like, okay, well, how do we put this into action? What are we doing here? But yeah, so if you want to talk further about anything, you know how to find us. We'll be around. We'll be helping TxDLA with the rest of these webinar series. So we're usually in the background. Today we were kind of out in the front, but normally you see us kind of hiding in the back and helping, doing our job the best we can to help people communicate and collaborate together. But don't ever hesitate to reach out to us if there might be a way that we can help you. Roxanne, any closing comments for you or anything?
I, again, just want to remind everybody, just you are the helpers in this situation. And so as you do that, use all of this knowledge that you've accumulated and find ways to help. And so I just want to encourage everybody who is, you're like, Roxanne, I'm a helper and I'm overwhelmed. I think Charlene said it best early on in that chat. Remember to breathe. And the way you check that is a deep inhale and exhale. Make sure you're doing both parts of the breathing. So they have to stay together. So remember to breathe and be a helper. And like Ken said, anybody needs to connect. We look forward to helping and continuing to support TxDLA as we all begin to navigate this, whatever this is. So we look forward to helping.
Bye, everybody. TxDLA will be back with the next session. I don't think it's been announced yet, but there will be another conversation on Tuesday. So just look for that, and you can put it on your calendar. It'll be at 11:30. What will the topic be? It's a mystery, but I bet it will be a good one. So have a great rest of the day and week, and hopefully everybody gets to breathe and relax a little bit in the upcoming weekend. So take care, everybody, and we will see you soon.